Earlier designs, we looked at fairly high towers where the galleries were stacked one on top of each other. But we really were trying to fit into this neighborhood, which is actually a neighborhood that Frank grew up in. It's a neighborhood of smaller buildings and houses. The question was, how do you create a large-scale monumental gesture without overpowering these pieces? And so the idea was to create a very horizontal expression of the building. It's on a scale with a street, but is not towering over the top of these houses.
When I was a kid, I played in Grange Park, and my grandmother's house is just down the street at 15 Beverly.
Frank Gehry has an exceptional ability to interact and interrelate. In this instance, there was this extreme humility and respect for the structures and for the legacy of this institution.
A word that Frank used a lot in the process of creating this building was respect. How do I respect the integrity of the park, which was a place for him of real pleasure and real deep associations. His grandmother lived down the street, he had art classes in the park, he walked through the park to get to the Art Gallery of Toronto as it was then known, so it was a place of real experience for him.
My first schemes had high buildings here on Dundas, but like towers interconnected, just because I didn't want to overpower the park.
I think in the end, what he decided was to build a building that was respectful, was to build a building that had a true connection back to the park. And so he created this vista. And the vista is really about the glory of the city. It's the whole notion of possessing what you see in the way that he possessed it. And I realize what it means is if the building works, it'll be filled with wonder in the way that a child's experience of a building or of a thing or of an object on the wall is an experience of wonder. And what was so powerful about that was that we all realized that that, of course, is how a building should express itself, that the outside should be an expression of the interior function.
The most profound difference that this space will have compared to others is the daylight. So we're going to be looking at paintings the same way as we would have looked at paintings in Ken's home. In other words, seeing it in the early morning, seeing it in the afternoon sun, seeing it in the evening, and seeing it change with artificial lighting come up at night. And I think it's that sense of the sort of circadian rhythm of the artwork, that it's sort of alive and it's organic, is what's going to make this gallery extremely special.
The spaces have been imagined, is the only way one can describe these incredible spaces, imagined for the sole purpose of displaying art in a social context. So people feel good in the space themselves, the art looks incredible, it all just comes together.
It's remarkable and beautiful, and if I can be so bold as to suggest that it is in a sense a place of worship, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of beauty.
It was truly a testimony to the spirit of each, that Frank took my father's feelings and he crafted what he believed to be spaces that celebrated the different collections.
What I engaged with from the very beginning with Frank's work was the notion of the journey. And to that degree, that's what this building's about, how you move from space to space. Ken was interested in that. He was interested in the way you'd move into a space. But the most important thing to Ken was how you actually came to the object and how you experienced it.
After Ken passed away, then David Thomson came into that process and had a real respect for his father's collection, but also incredibly deep knowledge of what the objects were about, which really helped us, particularly in European objects, fine-tune the position of each object. We mocked up every single wall of every single piece of display at full scale with photographs of the objects and spent lots of time working on the composition of the wall and how the objects would relate to each other.
The whole sense of how close you would get to an object, how close that object was to the pane of glass, and what the separation would be was an issue that David worried about for a long time because he wanted the intimacy.
Once David became involved, it was very, tangibly personal. You know, there was his son who clearly shared the passion for these pieces, and he knows so much about them.
That's played a huge role in the design, because these were things his father kept out on his desk, and so his memories of them are, he could pick them up and play with them, and the ships were right there. They weren't, far away. So that was a large part of how these ships were arranged in these cases, was to keep the ships really close to the glass where the viewer could see them, and at angles where they could walk all the way around it.
These were ship models made by craftsmen who are superb craftsmen. And this was one of Ken's passions, to collect them.
Can you imagine yourself being 1.5 inches high on this model and going up the ladder, and what are things going to look like, and so on? Can you imagine yourself on this model being 1/4 of an inch high and being a person and walking around? What would that look like? Would it really feel the same as if you were walking around on a ship?
The more I got to know Ken, the more I realized how intrinsic these ship models were to his life and his collection, his things that made him happy when he got up in the morning. And I wanted to help him realize that.
From my feeling is that he certainly put motion into the gallery. I mean, you've got to look at the design of the cases with these lovely wavy lines on both the top and also from the plan view, you've got these lovely wavy lines running through the gallery. So that gives you movement straight away. And the way that I've set the models up, they all tend to be going one way as well. I would hope that people would feel a sense of movement, which, you can't ignore with a ship.
As we look at these spaces here, we've done our utmost to capture the flow and the sequence of works by artists as they roll through his collections.
Both with Ken and with David, it's been a very close relationship and a lot of kind of mutual understanding of what the art objects are about.
I should perhaps explain that my father and I had a very special relationship, and we worked increasingly together and shared perceptions.
David is an enormous admirer of draftsmanship, of drawing, and in his liking, his admiration for the Rubens, he could feel absolutely at one with his father.
When he first set eyes upon the painting, he came to see me with an image, and he said, "Oh, David," he said, "are you prepared for what I'm about to show you?" And whenever he did this, I thought, oh, this is a feast or a famine. When he showed me the image, I realized that this was really a moment that none of us had been prepared for.
Ken studied it and compared it with other paintings, but I don't think anything deflected him from the first impression he had when he saw it, which is that he should have it for the collection.
Ken came in, it was after hours, so there was no one else here, it was nice and quiet. And I remember he hadn't seen the painting since the surface dirt and so on had been removed upstairs in conservation. And he was just struck dumb by it for the first few minutes. He just stared at it. And then he had a big grin on his face and said, well, it really is the best. And it was that sense of sculptural power, I think, that really got him. He was always very keen on sculpture and craftsmanship in art. In this particular painting, Rubens has gone out to make a kind of sense of living sculpture. There's almost a palpable physicality. You can grab the limbs and hold them in the painting, and it's the most intense, physically vibrant painting he ever did.
Where the general public is concerned, the stimulus is going to be enormous. It's the most varied collection to go on show anywhere in the world. What we're moving towards, I ought to say absolutely clearly, is the most extensive and the most systematic presentation of Canadian painting that there has ever been. Ken was particularly attached to Canadian painting.
If you're interested in Canadian art, you have to come to the AGO. There are going to be almost 130, almost 140 Krieghoffs in the Thomson galleries here. The most incredible Krieghoff experience you could get anywhere in the world.
You're going to see fantastic paintings in the same room as fantastic works from the first peoples of this continent. The Dundas mask stands alone with anything, the greatest Greek and Roman antiquities. And when people see that, they get it. And when people see it in this building, they're going to get it.
The Malmesbury châsse is a fine piece of Limoges enamelling. But what's fascinating about it is the quality of the enamelling, particularly the crucifixion, the figures on each side, and the figure of God the Father above. It will show them the fascination of medieval art. It will show them the colour, the three-dimensional quality, the spirituality of this marvellous period.
The ivories are about somebody rather private, rather quiet, who has a kind of intense relationship to the objects and buys things that speak to him directly. Ken Thomson's collection is, in a way, one of the most richly rewarding in terms of viewing, because he approached them as a kind of, as an amateur, but an amateur in the sense of a kind of lover of these objects. So he was actually approaching them in a way quite similar to the approach of the people for whom they were made, I think.
The variety of the collection, the fact that there are enamelling, there is sculpture, there is wooden sculpture, there is the boxwood carving. All these things indicate that he was very interested in the way in which artists went about dealing with different materials. And I think the actual process, the way in which it happened, probably fascinated him a great deal.
As Ken was collecting over the years, I think in him also percolated this vision of what to do with this.
I think he wanted to share it.
It's an extraordinary gift to the city, to the country. This immediately becomes one of the great art institutions in the world.
He wanted it to be a coherent collection that represented what he and his family had been working on.
My desire is to just have his legacy in situ and to leave behind a sense of the human being with all his frailty, but his enormous capacity to sort of experience and to share, and to do it in such a humble way, and to inspire.